Yeah, welcome everyone. We have a very exciting session and a speaker today. So thanks to AMA to get such speakers to Ahmedabad, so we can kind of learn and see what is happening latest in the world. I think AI is, as I think everybody knows, is no longer a buzzword, right? It's getting integrated into our day-to-day life. The way Chat GPT has exponentially grown, I think today practically everybody not only knows about it, is probably using it also. And what we were saying, people's apprehensions of AI will take jobs. I think more than that, now it is not going to replace, but people need to adopt AI so their jobs can become more secure. So that adoption and use is very important. So I think it is in best everybody's interest to know what is AI, what the future looks like, and that is why we have a very exciting speaker here today. So, Mr. Nitin Seth, he's a global business leader, entrepreneur, and best selling author, currently serving as a co founder and CEO of Incido. It's a leading digital data and AI company serving the Fortune 200 clients. He has almost nearly 3 decades of leadership experience across Flipkart, Fidelity Investments, McKinsey, and he has spearheaded large scale transformations in technology and business strategy. A two-time NASCOM Executive Council member and co-founder of Palashka University. He also has authored three. I just knew about one, but now I've come to know he's authored three very good books, Winning in the Digital Age. That's more about the digital transformation. Uh, Mastering the Data Paradox. That's about why digital and data is so important in today's time, and Human Edge in the AI Age. That's his latest book today. Widely regarded as a thought leader, he continues to shape the global dialogue on digital transformation, AI, and leadership. So we welcome Mr. Nitin Seth.
Thank you. Yes. Thank you.
I'll just briefly say a little bit about the book and then pass on the mic to Mr. Nitin Bhai. Human Edge in the AI by Nitin Seth explores how we can stay relevant and thrive amid the rise of artificial intelligence. Through this possible framework, he offers practical and timeless principles to strengthen our uniquely human qualities. This book is a powerful guide embracing the AI era with purpose, balance, and confidence. So, with that,
Thank you.
Nitin bhai.
Thank you so much. Is there a clicker? This I can use it, but I think I'll be audible. But I think Thank you. Yeah, got it. Yeah. Good evening. Yeah, very happy to be here in Ahmedabad, which is a city of entrepreneurs, city of commerce, and that's also a message which I'll in a moment talk about. But really, really happy to be in Ahmedabad, and I was at the Ahmedabad International Book Fair earlier in the day, and just seeing the vibrancy of the city and what's happening was very inspiring. So really happy. So human edge in the AI age. So this is, we are in the AI age, and this is a really big deal. Okay, just to set kind of the frame. The last 20, 30 years have been very, very technology driven. We have gone through successive technology waves, the digital wave with internet and mobile, and then the data explosion, which has created many, most of the really valuable companies in the world are essentially data companies. Um, and now we have AI, which in many ways is like a natural progression or even a convergence of these forces. But it's much bigger than any one of these. Yeah, this is not another technology shift. Okay, this is I think I see it as a very important inflection point in our human journey, and I choose my words carefully. If we have to compare, we should compare this with the discovery or invention of fire or wheel or electricity. It is that order of magnitude. Okay, it is that order of magnitude. In the short term, perhaps, like many massive trends, it is overhyped. So expect there is a bubble and expect a bubble crash at some point. But from a medium long term perspective, this is underhyped. Okay, that the impact of this, I think we still don't fully understand. Um, but at least for for me, and I've spent some time, of course, a lot of my work as a business is in this field with the largest and the leading companies in the world. So I get a chance to learn, not just do but learn. It's huge. It is huge. Okay, and as Anuja said, this is my third book, and this is also the progression of my business, because my business has progressed from digital transformation, data to AI. My first two books were really at the intersection of business and technology. That's what I do as a business. Yeah, and it's logical that I would write books which are kind of like nice for brand building, and it was logical my third book will be on AI. But when I started to think about the topic, it jolted me. It jolted me because it was obvious that AI was becoming more human than humans. We as humans becoming narrower in the process. And if you fast forward that, it has a very, I'm an engineer, so for anything I want to look at data. And when I looked at data, what I saw was very, very, it shook me that over the next 15 years, 35 to 50% of current jobs will go. Okay, and the researchers are very, it's quite surprising that anything which is a long-term trend and has such a big implication, such a big number, you would expect a lot of variance. Actually, there was not. Okay, the numbers were between 30 to 60%. Okay, those are crazy numbers. Like half of humanity will lose jobs. You're talking about like couple of billion people. What would that mean? Yeah, it would mean the end of civilization as we know it. And certainly as humans, we can't just submit ourselves to that. And what is really the way out? And what I also saw was that on a more positive note, that every industry will also go through a disruption with AI. And that actually creates a great opportunity. That creates an opportunity for entrepreneurs. Yeah. So the headline really, which I want you to absorb is that AI age is the end of the era of jobs, but it also heralds the era of entrepreneurs. And if you absorb that, then everything follows. Then everything follows. Okay. So it's a very big thing, because all of our process, system, everything is geared towards preparing people for jobs. Yeah. But if you take a slightly, I'm a student of history, that if you take a slightly longer perspective, you can put this, you can see it in some context. This notion of jobs is a phenomenon of the last 200, 300 years. Pre-industrial revolution, most of us would be what we would call self-employed, yeah, or entrepreneurs. But over the last 20, 30 years, this phenomenon of jobs has happened and we've got really addicted to it. Yeah, the certainty that it brings, and it's something we'll need to shake ourselves off. And there are many shifts that will need to happen. Most of it is what I call strengthening our core human capabilities. There is nothing out of syllabus here. There is no that train yourself on Copilot or this and that, and you will do well in the AI age? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. It's just a temporary measure. It's just a temporary measure. Okay. This whole thing that, learn AI and that's, don't compete, learn AI, that's how we will protect your job. No, 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 absolutely not. Absolutely not. That's just a marketing slogan. Because not doesn't take much to learn AI. Okay. The way you will really succeed is that if you are able to be stronger with your core human skills, okay, which is the point I make. Let's delve into the conversation. Okay, I'll take you through slides, which is how I kind of think, and then I know that this is a very informed audience. We already had a very nice pre-discussion, so I look forward to building on that. Okay, so here's what I will cover. Talk a little more about the AI age. There's some interesting dimensions I'll bring out. I'll talk about the opportunity, which is how every industry will change and how that is an opportunity. I'll talk about the not so great part, which is the impact on jobs. See, the first thing of dealing with change is to accept it, is to understand it and accept it. Without that, you can't do anything. Okay. Then we'll get to, okay, if this is what it is, what does the human advantage look like? And then I've tried to translate that into a practical framework. I call it possible. Also nicely, that's the mumkin, no? Mumkin hai. So where it came from, but anyway, it's kind of, it is mumkin. And then, what does it mean in terms of actions? Okay, so the AI age is here, and I already talked about it. That, see, I think of digital data and AI as intersecting forces. You can't really say that, you can't disaggregate them. Okay, they're all working together, and I call them the trifecta. I call them the Trimurti, Brahma, Vishnu, Mahesh. They are feeding into each other. That digital is what has led to this data explosion, and it's really quite mind-blowing if you understand it, that 90% of the data of the world has got generated over the last 2 to 3 years. It's absolutely mind-blowing. We have 10,000 years of recorded human history, and 90% of the data of the world has got generated over the last 2 to 3 years. So you can understand the magnitude of the data explosion, and that's largely happened because of this guy before that, digital. And this explosion of data is what is driving AI. Okay, because AI is based on 3 things: algorithms, data, compute. Algorithms were there. Well, we get very fascinated by algorithms. They have been in progress for many years. The problem was we didn't have the damn data. Okay, and that's where the algorithms could not be applied to real problems. Now, what OpenAI did was, and it was not just OpenAI, they made it available to consumers, but there were many companies, who, absorbed the data of the world, yeah, and which is the internet data, and use neural network models to create something sensible out of that. So the data of the world became accessible. Are you with me? Yeah, the data of the world became accessible. Yeah, that has really led to this explosion of AI, and the AI is further leading to an explosion of digital. It's making digital more usable through personalization. Are you with me? Yeah. So this Tridev, is a very important and natural thing. Now, what is happening? What is happening because of this Tridev coming together at a certain point, the inflection point, is one of my first statements that AI is, over the last 12 months, you can say, is becoming more human than humans. And it is many things which we would say is very unique to us as humans. Okay, so for example, problem solving. Machines have always solved problems. Okay, but within that, the most critical aspect of problem solving is problem identification. Yeah, that you frame the problem well, then you can solve it, isn't it? Yeah. But now with Gen AI, it's playing a big role in identifying and narrowing the problem. Okay, so problem identification, machines are doing it quite well now. Then you get to the creative process. Yeah, and it's fascinating. Like my last visit to India, I ended up meeting a lot of people related to the film industry. We had a number of fascinating conversations with, Soha Ali Khan, Ashutosh Gavarikar, who has done this movie Lagan, and then this new, young guy, Mohit Suri. There's a movie called Sayara. Yeah, it's apparently a big hit this year. And then I was in Chennai, I met Anand Nilakantan, who's the screenwriter of Bahubali. So it's fascinating, how much AI is already going into movie making. Okay. And they're of course still very much using their human instinct, but a lot of the actual process, from script writing to part of the production process, they're using AI. So even the creative process, a very significant part is now being done by AI. Okay. And then let's come to, so this is all IQ. Let's get to EQ. Yeah, say, okay, EQ is very human. We are very emotional. Yeah, machines are not emotional. Okay, and I'll share with you something very interesting. There have been a lot of studies, not one study, multiple studies with patients and online support with a human nurse and an AI nurse. And 9 times out of 10, the AI nurse is in the survey showing more empathy. Isn't it fascinating? Why do you think that is happening? Why was the AI nurse doing so much better than the human nurse? Any thoughts?
Because she understands the concept of empathy, and the technology can pass it on while talking to the.
How does the technology or machine understand the concept?
Basically, trained by the people.
See, it's very simple. It's a very simple thing. See, again, it breaks down a complex things like empathy. So what the machine does is that it mimics. Okay, and it mimics, without the set of biases that come in a human interaction. Because in a human interaction, नहीं आपको ऐसा नहीं है, आप शायद ये गलत बोल रहे हो. Okay, the machine is just going to mimic. So fascinating, but also what's fascinating is that the moment the patient knows that it's an AI, the score comes down. So it's interesting. Okay, but the point I'm making is a simple one, that AI is getting to an inflection point, where a lot of things that we felt were very human, machine is doing.
Can I make a point here? Generally, we feel and we tend to believe that humans can be more empathetic. But empathy is very difficult to come by like common sense. Whereas the AI trained on the best of empathetic stories and data can truly be empathetic, unlike human beings, because it is trained on the very best models.
Yeah, no, I agree. That's the point I'm making. But again, there are limitations to that. Okay, which we'll get into. Yeah, the broader point is a fair one, but it's not 100%. Okay, you get to 70-80%. So look, let's stay with this point. Okay, let's stay with the point about that we're not talking about any. This is getting into the core of what it means to be a human. So I've tried to understand that. Why is that happening? And of course, there's a technology way of understanding it, which is AI is driven by data, compute, algorithms. There's great progress happening there, and of course, that is what is driving it. But I'm also a student of Indian. I'm very fascinated by Indian spiritual knowledge, and that has driven a lot of my thinking. And I tried to take a more philosophical lens to understanding it, and I found it fascinating. So Indian spiritual texts are obsessed about answering one question. Okay, all texts basically answer that same question, and which is, who am I? Okay, they're all basically a study of the self. Okay, so I looked at one of the texts which I really like, which is the Yoga Sutras by Patanjali, and it has like this multiple layer concept of self. At the bottom there is buddhi. Okay, buddhi is like the universal intelligence. Okay, which is how we appreciate beauty, and evening sunset, or the Siberian crane knows how to fly from Siberia to Bharatpur Bird Sanctuary in Rajasthan without somebody teaching her. Okay, that's the universal intelligence. Above that, there is Aham, which is the meta layer, and then is Manas, which is the I, me, myself, okay, which is my narrow sense of identity. Now, if you look at the structure of AI, it's kind of like a remarkable parallel. AI is not one thing. AI is not just Gen AI. AI is multiple layers. Okay, you have the macro, the Gen AI layer, or the foundational models at the bottom, which is akin to the universal intelligence. It's kind of absorbed the data of the world. Okay. Above that, you clearly need to contextualize that with enterprise or domain data. Okay, which is kind of like the meta form, which is like Aham. And then finally, is you again contextualize that with the individual data, which drives personalization or now hyper personalization. Now, the interesting thing or the fascinating thing is that there is a continuous information flow happening across these three layers, which is why AI is unstoppable. Which is why if it's not working today, or the efficacy of a model is 60%, tomorrow it will be 62%, and then it will be 65 and 70 and so on and so forth. Because there is a continuous flow happening. But paradoxically, why this flow keeps on becoming bigger and bigger, this flow for us is getting fractured. This is getting fractured. As we progress more and more with technology, it's kind of pushing us more and more here into what I call a digital cocoon. A lot of the natural processes which connect us with this, which is where wisdom comes from, are getting compromised. Reflection, the leisurely nature walk, just sitting and doing nothing. Yeah, you allow synapse connections to happen. That is not happening. Yeah, so this is, to me, the reason I find it fascinating is that, look, this is an unstoppable force. This, having a lot of existential conversations around AI is futile. The genie is out of the lamp. It will keep on progressing. You can't do too much about it. You need to figure out how to make use of it. We better figure this one out. We better figure this part of the equation out. Is the right-hand side that we have to really, really focus on, because that is what is getting fractured and kind of limited. Okay, so let's keep going. So let's shift gears. Let's talk about so I started with a bit of a philosophical framing. Let's get to practically what will AI do, okay, to industries. Yeah, and there are a lot of things. You can boil that down into 4 set of changes. Okay, the first is personalization, and it's a big one. Okay, so if you look at the whole industrial revolution thesis, it was about scale and standardization. Yeah, Henry Ford made it very famous or immortal with his quote, that you can have any color car as long as it is the color black. Yeah, so it was scale and standardization. Scale, the mantra for value creation was scale, and scale was driven by standardization. Now the trifecta of digital data and AI is kind of completely turning that around. That you can have scale with complete personalization. Complete personalization. I'll give you an example, very practical example. So, one of my largest clients is Verizon. It's one of the largest telcos. It's the largest telco in the US. And, a couple of years back, I was having a chat with the head of data science. I asked him that, what is your segmentation strategy? It's like a smart question to ask. And he said, Nitin, I have 140 million segments. What did he mean? They have 140 million customers, and they can now identify each customer individually, specifically, and on a real-time basis. And they can change the experience for them on a real-time basis. Okay? So what is the use of segments? What is the use of any approximation? Okay? That's the world we are in. Okay? And now this is not just about telecom or retail. Of course, when we go to Amazon, we experience it. Of course, when we go to Netflix, we experience it. But now think about this concept applied to education, healthcare. Okay, fascinating set of possibilities. So personalization will drive change in every industry. The second big vector is automation. And see, look, technology has always driven automation. But what is different is that this automation is not at a task level. Okay, this is at a very fundamental level, that you set a goal and then AI designs, develops, executes, and then there's a feedback loop and it autocorrects. That's what really agentic AI is. Look, if I had writing a book in 2025, agentic AI would not be like one point here. I would perhaps do the slide very differently. Agentic AI is really, if last year was about Gen AI, 25 has been all about agentic AI. And the impact is very, very, very real. Okay, in my business, and I would say that we work at the highest end of technology, we are seeing 40% productivity using AI. And this is just like 8-10 months of effort. So where will that go? I think it will go to 80%. Okay, 40% has not meant 40% human reduction, but it certainly meant like 20-25% reduction. It's going to mean more. Okay, we are still growing as a company significantly, but we have also, it's a reality, we have cut headcount. Okay, there is all news around TCS and Amazon and Accenture, and there is something as if they are doing something evil or they are committing some crime. How will you run a business? How will you run a business? Because the client also sees that, they are demanding it, they know it. Yeah. So this automation that's what is different. Automation is not just of the lower end task. This is the high end task. Now, the third vector is innovation, which I find very exciting. I am not always very inspired by automation, because if all AI does is automation, then it's a downhill road. Okay. Innovation, very exciting. So I work with a lot of pharma companies, and drug development is a terribly capital intensive process. It's like billions of dollars and takes a lot of time. And now using AI and synthetic data, you can fast forward, you can cut down the time dramatically. It's a huge thing. I think we finally have a shot at maybe solving for cancer over the next couple of years. And the combination of 1, 2, 3 is creating completely new business models. So, just in interest of time, I may not go into details of everything, but just to give you a sense, disintermediation. Okay. Now, in business, you have different models, B2C, B2B, B2B2C, a lot of acronyms. Yeah. But with this trifecta, digital data and AI, what is happening is that the B2C model, the direct to consumer model, is becoming a lot more dominant or a lot more viable. Yeah. The second big shift is the breaking of traditional industry definitions. Most likely, your competitor is likely to come from outside of your industry. So I serve a lot of banks. Now, JP Morgan has no fear of Bank of America, has no fear of Wells Fargo, has no fear of Citibank. They've been competing with each other for like more than 100 years. Okay. At this point, they don't even fear the fintechs because they have mapped them out. If they fear somebody, they fear Apple. They fear Google. Okay. Because they have data that they don't have. Okay. And they can bring a very different perspective. So there's a big shift, not just happening in banking, but across industries. So again, my Verizon client, it's like they have just appointed the previous CEO of PayPal as the head of the largest telco in America. This guy has no telecom experience. Zero. And telecom is a very technical business. It's unbelievable. You bring the CEO of PayPal as the CEO of of Verizon. It's not a crazy move. There's a reason for that. Yeah. Infrastructure as intelligence. Again, a huge trend and a huge opportunity. See, traditionally in any business, any industry, the conventional wisdom is that the closer you are to the customer, more valuable it is. If you're far from the customer, it is commodity. With data and AI, that's changed dramatically. Yeah, which is the most valuable company in the world today? Nvidia. What is Nvidia? It's an infrastructure company. Increasingly, there is a compression front to back. There's a compression front to back, and it is actually the infrastructure which is driving value. Very different. All of this is resulting in what I call AI native business models, where the product is AI driven, the process is AI driven, and generally they are characterized by very few humans and very, very high revenue output per human. Yeah, so there's a lot of conversation about, when are we going to see the first $1 billion in a single person $1 billion company? That's quite something. If not single person, I think there's certainly a lot of talk around 10 people companies achieving 10 billion, achieving $1 billion valuation. It's a very, very different world. And this shift, people ask me which industries will be impacted. And I say every industry is going to be impacted. The only difference is the maturity curve, that some will get impacted sooner, like retail, media, which are already happening. Some may come later, healthcare, education, and some may be laggards, but over time, everything will get disrupted. And this is a huge opportunity for entrepreneurs because the disruption is going to be very significant. The existing players, especially the large players, will find it very, very difficult to keep up. But it equally creates a lot of opportunities for entrepreneurs, because also the good thing with AI is that it's very easy to get started. So it democratizes, or it kind of lowers the entry barrier in a way. Yeah, so that's a huge opportunity. Now let's get to the other side of the equation. Like in life, there are always two sides. Let's get to jobs. I already stated, my headline. Okay. Now a lot of people say that, yeah, it's technology. Always this happens, that some jobs get lost, others get created. Net, we are fine. So why are you being a, scaremonger? Especially when I try to talk to folks in the government, whether in India or US, I get this answer. Because generally, people who are, in that position don't want to hear very bad news. Okay. And so they don't like it. Okay. They say, go. So, but I think there are some very strong reasons, why what has happened in previous waves may not replicate. Okay, this time it will be different. First is that, and I mentioned that the impact is a lot more on the white collar jobs versus blue collar jobs. It's very stark data. These numbers are in billions. Okay, and this is how many jobs will be lost. So the dark blue is the white collar. I'm sorry, it's like just to make sure everybody is awake. So the blue is the white collar, the white is actually the blue collar. So in the next 5 years, 300 million jobs, white collar jobs, 30 million blue collar jobs. 1 to 10. For every blue collar job lost, there are 10 white collar jobs lost. You can argue it's easier, safer to be a plumber than to be a software developer. Okay. Now, of course, if there is any good news, I don't think it's good news, but the ratios balance out over a period of time. Why? Because by that time, robots would have really become more competent. Okay. Now, there is a lot of conversation about human plus AI, and that is, of course, the way forward. Okay. But just to put numbers, okay. Just to put numbers. Is probably one of the most important, analysis or research I've done. This is kind of human jobs. Okay, the sky blue is the human plus AI job. The light blue is the fully autonomous. You can see it for a second. It is very self-explanatory. Look at the downward curve of the human job. Okay, look at the slope of it. There is an upward slope for the human plus AI, but there is no way they are the same slope. Okay, what we will create is way more than what we're going to lose. Okay, and plus, even the human plus AI will reach an inflection point where it will start to go down and the pure autonomous will go up. Okay, and if anybody has here, tried Waymo in San Francisco? Anybody tried autonomous cab? I think it's just worth going to San Francisco just to do that. Sorry? Yeah, the Waymo is a lot more established today. It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. It's like a shocker. It's so good. It's so good. It's not that it drives safely in one zone. The streets of San Francisco are not very different from Chandni Chowk in Delhi. Okay, it's like very narrow and very crowded, and it will change lanes. It will accelerate. It will stop. It's crazy. It's crazy. So if cars are autonomous today, and there is a lot of conversation already, technology is there of the entire trucking industry in the US becoming autonomous. So the autonomous already is at a fairly advanced point. Okay, so if you understand this slide, okay, it's a reasonably simple slide. I think you will understand what the heck I'm talking about. Okay, and why I wrote this book, and yeah, and look, this research is fairly consistent. It's a very busy slide, just making the point that the numbers are pretty consistent. Okay, if you look, it's not one person saying it. The numbers are pretty consistent. Okay. The jobs that will be created just because of AI are a fraction, 6%. The jobs you're going to lose are much higher. So the net is still pretty negative. Okay. So that kind of gets me to the point, which I've been making, that we really are looking at a very seismic shift, that the end of the era of jobs, but also the rise of the age of entrepreneurs. Okay. This is our hope. Okay. This is our hope. There isn't too much, gap or variance in researchers, thinkers, consultants, economists saying that how much will be lost. Okay. The only X factor is that completely new activity that might happen. Now, where might that happen? And this is also a very important point, because that's not really part of our discourse right now. The way we understand AI today is NVIDIA, which is the infrastructure, is of course data, and it's kind of then our fascination with LLMs, which is where OpenAI and Claude and Perplexity and DeepSeek and everybody comes in. This is limited job creation. Just be clear about it. Okay, it's not too much. The real opportunity, and which is the entrepreneurial opportunity, is what I call the application layer. That how do you now use this infrastructure to solve for that personalization, automation, innovation, business model change across industries? That is the opportunity. And certainly for us in India, that is the opportunity. Okay, because we are quite far in this game. Maybe we should catch up. Yeah, but it's unlikely to be our winning formula. Okay. And anyway, what we need to solve for is that we are going to have a massive, given we are so services driven, and we are certainly going to have a massive loss. Okay, how do we recoup that and more? Okay, so this is the layer. I'll keep going. Okay, so what does it mean for the new human advantage? And I kind of break it very simply, again, with my engineer's mind, to 4 blocks, physical, intellectual, emotional, and something I call spiritual. And look, our basis of advantage has not been constant. That has evolved. So, for most of our existence as a species, it was the physical quotient. Yeah, and you can see that also in leaders that we have adored, Alexander the Great. Yeah. Now, post the Industrial Revolution, the value of the physical went down because machines started to take that over, and it was really the intellectual quotient. And you see Napoleon Bonaparte, not like physically that formidable, but very bright. And then, with the information age, even the machines started to take over that. And it was EQ. You look at the leaders today, not necessarily differentiated by IQ, but you can say emotional, maybe emotional manipulation is what they do really well. So, maybe EQ. But then we saw earlier that AI is beginning to do emotions also quite well. So where does that leave us? So, it's kind of, you have to think a little out of the box. It's not like a natural, to say that, no, it's EQ plus SQ now. So here is my submission. So far, the book and all my arguments are based on research. Yeah. But now I begin to talk about the future. And when you talk about the future, you have to make some assertions. You have to put some leaps of faith. This is where it comes in. So here is my my submission, that the human advantage in the AI age is a combination of two things. The first is to rediscover the pioneering and adventurous instincts of the early man. And I'm not saying we're going to go back to the caves, but for sure, the world that we have constructed, the post-industrial revolution world that we have constructed over the last 200, 300 years, is going to get dismantled in the next 20 years. Okay. And it may not be next 2-3 years, but we will see that. Okay. So in a way, it is again pioneering. Again, creation needs to happen. Okay. At the same time, and again, it's kind of coming back to my roots in Indian spirituality. Our concept is that man is not static. It's evolving. It's an evolutionary process. And thinkers like Sri Aurobindo have talked at length about this. 100 years back, he spoke about, the concept of Superman and consciousness and growth in consciousness. And that's my belief, that on one hand, there is the rediscovering the pioneering instincts of the early man, but it is also combined with the expanded consciousness of a Superman. Okay, so now if we buy this, then how do you make it happen? So as a practical person, not an academician, now that's where I've tried to create a framework. Okay, the possible framework, which is problem solving, openness, spirituality, sports, impact, balance, leadership. Let's just spend like a few minutes on that, because I'll like to stop and do Q&A. So problem solving. So while machines do problem solving very well, but it is such an important part that as humans, we can't say that we are going to give up on that. Okay, it is just too important. And I think there is still a lot of value for structured problem solving. Starting and spending significant part of my career in McKinsey, I think that's probably one of the most valuable things I learned, structured problem solving. Yeah. And I think it's not just technical skills, but problem solving, which I think has also to be taught and inculcated in a very, very structured manner. But while I talk about this, at the same time, the role of wisdom is perhaps becoming even more important. So structured problem solving basically relies on breaking down the problems and then using data. Now, when data is abundant and everybody has access to the same data, then how do you differentiate? Yeah. And that's where intuition, or I prefer the word wisdom, which is really your retained set of, which is your pattern recognition, comes in, and that gives depth and perspective to your problem solving. Yeah, so it's my submission that in the AI age, it becomes even more important. However, the challenge is, and we saw this earlier in one of the earlier slides, that the natural processes that build wisdom, the village elder, kind of a process, is getting hugely disrupted in the digital and AI age. So, how do you build wisdom? How do you create processes to build wisdom in this crazy AI age? Openness is quite obvious. There's so much change. If who moved my cheese, right? You have to move beyond that. You have to be open. And once you're open, then it is about learning. And of course, the traditional methods of learning are also changing quite dramatically. We'll not dwell on that. Spirituality, one of the core points I'm really making. See, when you say moving forward in the AI age is about being more human. Yeah. And we saw that PQ, IQ, EQ, SQ. I didn't dwell on the SQ then. And my submission is that we're all spiritual beings. That's a very important aspect of who we are. And it's kind of, again, it's like the flow of time and civilizations, historically, at least in our culture, science and spirituality was a continuum and was one thing. And somehow, with the influence of the Western way of thought, it's almost kind of become something which we are very tentative about. What the heck is this? Yeah. And at least my submission is that it is time for us to embrace that, because that's a real advantage. I see that practically for myself, that this is a world of noise. I'm inundated with so much signals, so many different things. And at least the coping mechanism for me is meditation, that I sit in meditation, I find some clarity, and and with that, there's also more creativity, there is also more empathy. And I think it is so foundational. It is so foundational that if you think about what is really, even in the short, medium term, what is the AI plus human? The human is about context, it is about creativity, it is about connection. And I think this is the heart of all of that. Yeah. At the same time, I also make a point about sports. So I'm very driven by this concept of duality, of how seeming opposites, you have to balance that. In a virtual world, of course, the physical becomes even more important. And AI is tough. You can't, it's not a solo game. You have to do it as a team. And what better way of learning how to work in teams than sports? AI also, especially if it is about being an entrepreneur, you will have more losses than wins, for sure. And one of the most important things for an entrepreneur, I'm sure there are many entrepreneurs here, is resilience. How do you bounce back? And you learn that in sports, because even if you're Roger Federer, you lose a lot. Yeah. So, it's as an athlete, that's just something that it builds you, that, you lose and you bounce back, and then you win. I'm rushing a little bit. Impact is a very, very important dimension, that it is this whole impulse that we have of doing more, making a mark, making a difference, leaving a positive legacy. And we can argue that, it's a very self-oriented world, and it is. But at the same time, there are many more people who contribute than who just take. And that's why the circle of life continues. And that is how we are different from machines. That machines are very goal-oriented. But, we have a way of reframing our goals. And, it's not just about self, and it's about making a bigger difference. That's where compassion, empathy, all of those things come in, and I think are going to become even more important. Leadership. AI age is, of course, the end of the era of managers. We have been talking about this for a while, but I think AI age is really that. When everything is changing, then what is it that you're going to manage? Yeah. The most important thing will be that there is a lot of ambiguity, and you have to set direction, not just at a macro level, but at a more specific organization team level. And that is leadership, setting direction. But it is also going to be, how do you identify change agents? You lead a lot of change agents, because the change is very significant. It is not just about one or few great leaders doing it. You have to really create that change force. Okay, so that's a very important expectation from a leader. And then, of course, sorry, I missed balance. I'm sorry. It's one of my favorite topics, duality, and you will see that in all of my books. That when the duality is the inherent nature of everything. Everything you see contradictions. Okay, and when you are in a complex situation, you can't say I will optimize X, not Y. In simple situations, you can do that. Yeah, and in a very complex world, this mastering duality in so many dimensions, I can put 100 more dimensions, okay, will become even more important than before. Of course, this man plus machine, that's what we've been talking about. Yeah, can you ignore the machine? But can you just let it be machine? You can't. Yeah, it has to be both. And finally, the hero of the story is entrepreneurship, and I spend a lot of time on that in the book. That the way I've approached it is to look at some examples. So Steve Jobs, who really is a hero of mine, and I think a big learning that I take from him is this notion of connecting the dots. that Steve Jobs was not driven by market research. He was very driven by his own set of experiences, and he connected the dots across them. And that's why if you track his journey, in his later years, his output was exponential because it was all building on each other. Okay. Now, if this dude was like a bit of a maverick, then this guy is like off the charts on the maverick scale. Okay. It's like, I just find it unbelievable. Steve Jobs, I can still get my head around Steve Jobs, but Elon Musk, and it's very easy to hate him. But what he's created is like absolutely ridiculous. Like multiple trillion-dollar companies, and which are all completely industry defining or redefining. Yeah, it's a very maverick and moonshot thinking at a very different level. But what I take away from Musk is how hands-on he is. And that's what I say, that any billionaire entrepreneur, successful entrepreneur that I know, they're so hands-on. They're so hands-on. It's a very managerial malaise to say that, I am a senior guy and this is beneath me. Okay. So while we can talk about, a lot of this big picture stuff, any entrepreneur here would know that the biggest point in succeeding as an entrepreneur is staying alive. Yeah, that don't get knocked out. Yeah, so if you don't get knocked out, you kind of have an opportunity of, playing tomorrow. And one of the most inspiring examples of that to me are the giant sequoias. Anybody here seen the giant sequoias? Yeah, so then you know what I'm talking about. So sequoias are among the largest living organisms on Earth, and they're also the oldest, and the two are correlated. Okay, they are the oldest, and that's why they're also the largest. And the key to their longevity is the fact that their bark has this fire-resistant tannin. Okay, so there are a lot of fires in California, as many of you may know, and they survive the fires. Okay, they actually grow through the fires. So it's very interesting that when the sequoias were discovered in the second half of the 19th century, the forest wardens saw these magnificent trees. See, it's kind of me. I'm 6'1". You can see the sequoia. This is probably a quarter of the sequoia. Okay, so these are really something.
285 feet. The tallest.
General Sherman, I believe. Yeah. So this is so this is something. Okay, and so they wanted to protect the sequoias from the fires. But as they tried to do that, they saw that the growth of the sequoias is getting stunted. And then they actually realized that the sequoias actually need the fire to grow, because fire happens, rest of the vegetation gets burnt, which actually creates the opportunity for them to have a growth spurt. Great lesson for entrepreneurs, isn't it? Surviving fires or growing through fires. So, okay, entrepreneurship. Now let's kind of bring this to a conclusion. I really do think that, we are at a very decisive point, and my final chapter is kind of, I'm trying to reflect on the Bhagavad Gita. Then I made it a little more neutral so people don't feel that I'm trying to, be preachy. But I do see things in that fashion, that, Arjun was at the field of Kurukshetra, that, when we are oftentimes, when we are faced with something very profound, it immobilizes us. It's too big. Okay. And I think that's where we are. And I think if we don't act decisively, we'll fall into irrelevance. Dinosaurs also ruled this earth at some point. They disappeared. What is to say that as a Homo sapiens have a divine right to rule this planet? Okay. But equally, if we take decisive action, this could be the next stage of human evolution, a very important step in human renaissance. Okay, that's how I see it. And for that, action is needed at multiple levels: policymakers, corporates, educators, but most importantly, individuals. It's so too big, too important, so you can't just leave it to somebody. Bhaiya, government ko karna hai. It's too big, it's too important. Okay, multiple actions are needed at multiple levels. That's why I've written this book. I'm here, and I want to just trigger a conversation. I don't have a commercial objective in this, okay, just to be clear, but I just see this as so important that this has to be talked about. And what I would leave with is that, look, future is, there's a lot happening, okay, but the future is not to be feared. I think the future can be created. It's not a given. It can be created. The future is possible. Thank you. Can we have some? Yeah. Hanji, thoughts, questions? Is it at the back?
Sir, very insightful session. Thanks for this. I have two questions. So one is related to.
If you wouldn't mind introducing yourself as well, please, just briefly.
Yeah. So I'm Darshan. I have close to around 25 years of experience working in IT industry, mostly onto the ERP platforms.
Okay.
So first question is, around policy, right? So I think continents, countries are kind of in the process of framing the policies around AI, right? The usage of it. Recently, I read a blog where Australia is trying to kind of, restrict the usage of the data which is available on the public platform, right? And make it chargeable, right? So that uh, the data which is created by humans, public, right, which is their own data, they want to kind of restrict the usage, right? So how such policy frameworks can impact the shaping of the AI? That is one first question. Second, yeah, I think every organization is kind of trying to create their own AI LLMs, right? So on and so forth. The computing power which is required to run these AI tools is humongous, right? So from a sustainability standpoint, how this is going to shape up, will
Sure.
every organization who is creating, which are creating AI models, will they be creating their own computing power?
Yeah, no, thank you. Both are very deep questions. Thank you for that. So the first is around policy. So I'll share kind of two perspectives. The first is that oftentimes policy can be used as a way of not making progress. Okay. So there is, I don't know about Australia as well, but it's quite a contrast between America and Europe. Okay. So Europe has taken a very, very policy heavy perspective, and America, especially the current administration, the many things you can say about it, mostly not very good. But I think on this one, at least, I kind of like where they're going, which is go easy on the policy bit. Okay. And I feel the same thing about India as well. Okay. That a lot of the conversations that I've had at the policy level, we are spending too much time on it. Arey pehle bhaiya bana to lo, kar to lo. Yeah. If you put too much of your energy just in kind of trying to police it and kind of manage it, you will not build anything. So, generally, I come from a perspective that, look, first we have to participate in the damn thing. Okay. We have to go put full energy in it. However, there is something which is extremely critical from a policy perspective, okay, and which is about data access and data privacy. Yeah, that is the real issue in all policy to my mind, because how should, because there is a lot of interplay happening between private data and that it kind of getting into a much larger space. And today, when you use any, whether it is Facebook or ChatGPT or whatever, just any app out there, and you say scroll down and you say I agree, you are never reading it. You're never reading it. Okay. Maybe Mr. Tomar maybe reads it because he's trained that way, but most people would never be reading it. And you should not be in a position where you are, you are giving that consent, because it makes no sense. When you buy a car, okay, there are already standards. There are emission standards that yaar isse itni car to bikegi nahi, isn't it? Or maybe there are at 2 or 3 different standards, that can be sold. And I think that's where we need to go. We need to have global standards around privacy. And I think that's very important, because if we don't do that, then it's a disaster that is waiting to happen. And I think this is because there are many topics you can be discussing in data, in policies. I think this is the one where there needs to be a lot of focus, and we need to address that. So that's kind of on the policy part. Yeah. But again, my overriding thing is don't overdo it. Okay. Don't overdo it, because if you overdo it, you will not create. Yeah. Because I see that across industries, which are very heavily regulated, like banking, there is no innovation happening around AI. Okay. Whereas others are galloping. Yeah. So what is going to happen is that at some point there is going to be puduk. It's going to, it will be too much regulations. Regulators will say, no, it has to change. And then it's going to be, as opposed to a more graded change, it is going to be a dhamaka. Okay. So regulation can't hold back good idea, good technology, whose time has come. Okay. So that's number one. Number two, you raised a very, very pertinent point. I completely agree with that. This technology is today very, very consumption intensive. And we were talking, before the session, I think it gets back to almost the American model of technology investments, which are very, very capital intensive. It's almost like brute force. And because fundamentally the way foundational models have been built, they very much have their broader objective in this elusive search for AGI, which I think is, it will happen. It will keep on progressing in that direction. But when the entire approach is driven towards that, you boil the ocean. Okay, you boil the ocean. Okay, and when you boil the ocean with all the data, it is, how is that going to be efficient? Okay, so it's a very, very deductive approach. And I think that's where the Chinese model with DeepSeek, which is more inference based, which is a more inductive approach, and therefore we see that it is, as a technologist, you would be aware that the consumption requirement is 1/5 or even 1/10. I think that's why it's so scary, for the American technology bandwagon. So I think over the next 2-3, it's not even 5 years. I think over the next couple of years, I think this question of how do we make this more consumption efficient is going to become super critical. And I think that the way enterprises are dealing with it, when I work with my clients, the big telcos, the big banks, and so on, who are doing AI at scale, they are introducing layers, okay, which kind of filter how much data is being used, and I don't want to get into the technical aspect, something called ontology, or the knowledge layer, which kind of filters down, so you don't have to, it's not like brute force. But I think it's a very, very fair point, and I think not enough, more needs to be done there.
Thank you, sir. It's a very knowledgeable session. Yes, sir. My question is that as an IT company owner, should we concentrate on, because we do not have own infrastructure providing services, right? So can we focus on AWS and Azure services to provide our customer? For as you told that infrastructure will be the future, right? As an entrepreneur.
Yeah, but I don't know if I necessarily would extend that to saying that as a software company, infrastructure services. Yes, infrastructure is very, very important, but that's also a space which is very scale driven. So you have giants like HCL and Wipro and Accenture and others, which are really, really dominate that space of infrastructure services. So So you have to see what will be your basis of competitive advantage. Generally, the world of tech services is going to go through a very big disruption. I'm sure you are aware of that. And at least, my thesis is that the technology aspect of it will become maybe less relevant. And I think the domain knowledge is going to become extremely important, because the big horizontal players are over time going to solve most of the large technology problems. But what they do not have the ability to solve are the very specific, uh, very specific industry specific problems. It doesn't fit in with their model that easily.
We have already started. We have already started to use N10 and create the agents for automation for our customers.
See, there's a long journey. Creating agents doesn't mean that it is impact. Okay, creating agents is very easy. It's like a khilona. It's like a toy. It's very, very, maybe in 2 years, your daughter will be creating agents, or maybe sooner. Okay, but bringing that agents into like a logical framework, there's a big difference between agents and agentic AI. Okay, so getting it to that level where it actually delivers on impact is a huge road. Okay, and as you go there, you will find that in-depth understanding of that industry, even within industry, that domain really becomes important, because just to bring it, not make it too technical and bring it for everybody, that see today where are we with AI? And I also made a point that it is overhyped in the short term, underhyped in the long term. Here is the overhyped part. It's very easy to get to like a 40 to 60% answer. And we are not able to discriminate whether it is 40, 60%. We think it is 90%. Okay, and so we feel very excited. But it is most time it is 40, 60%. Okay. When you actually see, if you're doing it for writing emails or homework or whatever, it is fine. Yeah, those are casual use cases. But the moment you start to use it for enterprise use, and that is really where you are going to make money. Okay, so all this B2C is all happy. It is all, it's not a commercial model. Okay, at this point. So the moment you get to the enterprise application, you can't work with 40 to 60%. Okay, and I think even over the last 6 months, I have seen a shift. So in the first half of the year, there was so much excitement. I have been able to build agents. Wow, this is amazing, so easy. I'm able to get something done. Yeah, but from that something done to actually something that works is very tough. Getting from that 60 to 80, even 80% is not easy. Okay, and the difference between 100% or even a 90% and where AI is, which could be anywhere, let's say 60%, that gap is what I call context. Because the human decision making, which we're trying to replicate, is very complicated. It's not just rules, because the rules are very dynamic based on context, and mapping that context onto the machine is not an easy process. It requires, that's where this whole ontology bit comes in. Now, for sure, AI will get there, but it's not that easy a process. It is going to take some time. Domain knowledge is key in that, and that's where it is one of the very, very, if I were to advise from a short, medium term perspective, instead of learning technology, learn the subject, learn the domain.
Come in between. Let us give a round of applause to him. He has specially been here. He would spend much more time with us, but he has to catch flight, and still it is 1 hour journey from here to airport. Thank you very much, Nitinji, for being with us.
Thank you.
And we will be surely going through your book, and always do keep AMA in your mind and heart. Your next book also, we would like to host you over here whenever you are writing the 4th or 5th book. As I have understood, the AI part from his talk and whatever the things are going around with us is that if we understand AI in a good way, it is dynamic, and if we misuse it, it is dynamite. So thank you very much. Have a good dynamic use of AI, and let us spread good words about AI and be away from dynamite. Thank
I
you
think
very
we
much.
have copies of books for everybody.
Yes, we have copies of book. One person will get one book. Please do give your contact details to them, which I have to give it to the publisher. Sir is kind enough that he has given the free books to all of you, those who are attending this.
Please read it, and if you like it,